Hello everyone. In this tutorial we're going to take a look at creating our first graphical user interface. This is very exciting. We're going to add two numbers together from a form. Adding two numbers doesn't sound too exciting, but we're going to do this with a graphical user interface. So this is getting exciting. We're going to have text boxes and buttons and labels, and the user's not just going to use the output console in NetBeans. Instead, we're actually going to create forms that look like software or programs that you've been using before. So we are in, of course, our NetBeans environment here, and we're going to do like we always do. We're going to say File, Start a New Project, and this time we're going to create a Java application as we always do. So then we click Next. And this is the screen where we do things a little bit differently. So we're still going to name our project. We're going to call it with our last name. Let's say it's Smith, and we're going to say add two nums. That's what our project does. But this time, where it says Create Main Class, we're actually going to uncheck that. So we're going to have that so that that's not checked off. And that's how that's our first step and the first difference for when we create programs that use a graphical user interface. So this is not checked, and then we're going to create finish. Now we haven't looked over here yet, but this is our project and some of the associated files connected to the project. And if we notice under source package, there's nothing there. Quite often that's where the main program would be. So we're going to right click on source package, and it says new, and we're going to create a new JFrame form. So this is our new form, and form is the term used for the thing that actually shows up, sort of like the window for our program. So we're going to create a new JFrame form. So again, I right clicked on source package, new JFrame form, and I'm going to give this form a name. I'm going to call it FRM. We're going to call this one our main screen. So FRM main screen, and then I click finish. And this is where it gets exciting. So this is where we can design our form. So this looks entirely different than what we're used to when we're programming the other programs that we've created so far in the course. This is our form. So I'm going to make this one just a little bit bigger. And if you look over here, we've got some swing containers, some swing controls, and we also have properties down here. The main two things we're going to look at in this tutorial are our swing controls and our properties. So this is what the form looks like. And when we run the program, this form is going to appear. So we're going to add a few things. I'm going to add a label and a second label. I'm going to add a text field and a second text field. I'm going to add a button, and I'm going to add a final label. So when we run our program, the user will type in the first number into text field 1, the second number into text field 2. They'll click the button, and then the answer will be outputted. So we'll add these two numbers. Right now, though, it's not very helpful for the user. So some of the words used on here, like JLabel1, JLabel2, JButton, these aren't too descriptive for the user, so we're going to switch those. The other thing we can do if we'd like, if you notice I've clicked here right on the button, and so these are all the properties for the button. So I can change the text color in here. I can change what the button actually says. For example, if I click under text and instead I write add, then now my button actually reads add. There's another way to do that as well. I can right click on my button and I can say edit text, and I can say add the numbers or whatever I'd like the button to say. I'm going to change that back, and I'm just going to have it say add. So that's going to be the button that the user clicks to add two values. I'm going to right click on my label, and I'm going to get edit text, and I'm going to have this one say answer, because that's where the answer is going to be displayed. I'm also going to change this label to say first number, so that the user knows that's where they can type the first number. And I'm going to change this one to say second number. So these are all our labels and all our buttons. And these are the things that the user will see. So they will see a label that says first number, second number. They'll see the button that reads add, and they'll also see a label called answer. Now what I would also like to do, though, is change the names of these. So not just the words that appear on the screen, but when we go to program, we might have to refer to these buttons or refer to these labels. So I'm actually going to change the variable name of this first label. It's a label, so I'm going to call it LBL, and I'm going to give it a name descriptive, something descriptive like first num. So because this is a label, it's called LBL, and it's first num. I'll right click on our second label, and I call this LBL second num. I'll right click on our button. I'll change variable name to btn add. And of course, our final label, we'll call this lbl answer. And it's very important to understand what we did there. The text, if you right click and edit text, that's what the user will see when they use this program. But if you change the variable name, that's for the programmer. So that's a behind the scenes way to reference that label. For example, if the user does something and I want the label to change, I have to know what that label is called. So for example, we're going to want the answer label to change. So I have to remember that it's called LBL answer. Now playing with our text fields here, I'm going to get rid of the text so that there's nothing in either of these text fields. And you notice they shrink down, so we can stretch those just by clicking on them. And we can see how wide they are. And there's some guides to help us to make sure that they're the same size as well. We can also move them a little bit closer to the labels if we want. And we're going to change their variable names as well. So I'm going to call this txt first num. And of course, to stay consistent, I'll call this one txt second num. So what we've done here is we've set up our form. We can play around with how it looks, the size of it, and its appearance. We can even change the colors of some of the writing. We could change the background color. And those are some of the things that you might want to play around with. Just be aware as you're changing colors that the user has to be able to read these. So we've seen projects where it might be yellow writing on a pink background. And that can be, maybe it looks really nice, but it might actually be very difficult to read. So we want to make sure that we've chosen colors that are appropriate. So it's now time to get into our coding. Now this is a little bit different. We don't want to create our main program. Instead, what we're going to do, we're going to create code that's within the button. So if I double click on the add button, I'm taken to this window where I can write all my code. So you see here it says button add action performed. This is the code that will be executed when we click the add button. So I'm just going to delete that line that's already in there, and I'm going to make some space. We are going to create a few variables here. For example, we need a variable for our first number. We need a variable for our second number. And we need a variable for our answer. When the user has clicked add, what I'd like to happen is I'd like whatever value that was entered into that first text field, I want that to go into num1 variable. And whatever's been entered into the second text field, I want that to go into num2. So this is a big important line of code. We're going to say num1 equals txt first number dot get text. Now you notice there's a problem with this line. So what this line's supposed to do is it's supposed to look in the text field called first num, and it's supposed to get text. But there's a problem. It says incompatible types. And what this means is that when we have a text field, it's actually reading in a string. And of course, what we're trying to do is store a string inside of num1, which has been declared an integer. And so it really doesn't like that. But we can do a little trick here. What we're going to do is we're going to say integer.parse int. And what we've done here is we've taken this string and we're doing something called parsing the integer. So we're parsing the string where we're taking the string and we're actually turning it into an integer and then storing it into num1. So if they type 13, it's not the string 1, 3, like those characters 1, 3. We've actually turned it into an integer, and that's the integer 13. Now as a programmer, I like to be efficient. So I'm going to copy that line of code, and I want to bring in number 2, so the second number, and we'll just change this to second num. So again, we've declared our variables, and then we have code that will bring in a string, turn it into an integer for num1, bring in a string, and turn it into an integer for num2. We can now calculate the answer, which is num1 plus num2, and all that's left is to actually display this. So we now want our label to change. So we want LBL answer. We want to actually set the text to be answer. So we want to change the label that reads answer. We want it to actually output the value of the answer variable. Now again, we're getting an error. And again, it's an incompatible type because we have an integer, but we want to display it as a string. And so there's one final step we have to do. We have to say string.get dot value of answer. And what this will do is it will take the answer string, or the answer integer, and it will actually turn it into a string. We can get rid of some of our extra lines of code here. There's no error messages and no warnings for our code. We can go back and we can add some comments. For example, we can say that these are our variables. I won't spend too much time doing the commenting, just so that we can get through the tutorial. So now when it's time to run our project, if we want to go back to our form, we can click up here, and we can click Design, and that was our form. And we're going to run it the same way. We're going to click Run Project. This time the console window won't appear. Instead, we'll get our actual form. So we'll say, yes, I'd like to run FRM main screen. And this is our form. It looks amazing. There's a spot for our first number, a spot for our second number. We can click Add. So if we say, let's take 22 plus 45, we click Add, and the output is 67. Now there's still some things we can do in terms of centering and things like that, but we just wanted to get through this tutorial to ensure we learn how to build our first form and to create the code that goes on behind the scenes. So experiment with this a little bit. This is quite powerful because we can now start creating programs that look like some of the projects we're used to seeing in real life.